Well, hello and welcome to the Snap Society. I'm Jamie Larson, and today I have a special guest with me, Steve Cuss. We actually did a Facebook Live, and twice my internet went out, and then the last time I decided to do it on my phone, and it went on my personal page. Could we have been more of a hot mess? Probably not. And the funny thing is, the topic of this Facebook Live was anxiety, and you better believe my heart was racing, and I was having a whole lot of anxiety when all this was happening. So we ended up getting to the point where we could finally talk about this topic, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Please ignore me fiddling with my the internet, making sure that it was working, because like I said, it was my third time trying to get this thing going. But if you struggle with anxiety, which I can pretty much guarantee everybody struggles with anxiety, even if you don't name it that. Maybe you call it fear or nerves, but a lot of us struggle with anxiety, maybe going to a photo shoot. Maybe we have anxiety when it comes to talking about our prices or raising our prices, or maybe we have anxiety with reveal nights. And for me, anxiety shows up in a couple of different ways, but what it does to me is either I don't show up at all, meaning I will decide not to do something because I'm so anxious over it, or I'll push through the anxiety, and sometimes I do it, but I don't show up well. And that's a real problem. And so I've been taking this leadership class, and we've been talking about anxiety, and I wanted to bring my teacher in, who's also my pastor, Steve Cuss. And we were just talking about how to identify the anxiety, how to name it, and then what to do with it. So I hope you enjoy this. This is definitely a video you can share with your friends. You guys, this is a hot mess. I don't know what's going on with my internet. Talk about anxiety. I've got it right now. Yes, we have to do this.
There you go.
Okay, so
we were talking about the physiology of anxiety.
And before we start, this is Steve Cuss. I'm Jamie Larson. If you're a replay viewer, hey, we're so excited that you're here. This is definitely a video that you can share with your friends because it's all about anxiety, and we all have it, and it can make us show up in different ways or just not show up at all, which is really bad and unfortunate. So Steve is here to talk to us about anxiety and what that looks like and how we can really show up the best for it, or not show up the best with it, but
get a grip
on it instead of it having a grip on us.
Because what we're saying is anxiety tends to have a grip on us, and just there's a few tools you can use to get a grip on it. And if you can flip the power dynamic, you can actually be free from the kinds of things that plague you. So we were talking about the physiology of anxiety. We're talking about how it starts in a spinning mind, a racing heart, or a tightening gut. And that step one would be to try to figure out where it starts with you, because if you can name where it starts, then you can actually intervene earlier. I'd say step two would be if you are able to notice when you're anxious. This sounds like very basic, but actually you'd be surprised that a lot of people don't know that they're anxious until they're really anxious. So if you can start to pay attention to what makes you anxious early, you can then intervene early and start flipping the power dynamic. So in my case, for example, anxiety almost always starts with me in a racing mind. My thoughts go like a rat on a wheel, and the signs that I know that I need an intervention would be if my solution to my anxiety, for example, is just to think more about it, like to worry more, that's a sign. Or in my case, if I go to bed and the last thing on my mind is something I'm worried about, or the first thing on my mind when I wake up is something I worry about, that's a sign I know I need an intervention.
Okay, so in the comments here, let us know if you have experienced this. And so Steve is talking about sometimes we don't even know that it's actual anxiety that we're experiencing, and I don't think I would have called it anxiety. I would have called it fear. I would have called it worry. But my anxiety comes up definitely with a racing heart. And yours is with a racing mind.
Right.
So for you, in the comments, what is it for you? Let's say you're showing up at a photo shoot. You've never met these people. You really want to do a good job. You're in the car just getting ready to get out. What is happening with you? Do you have a tightening of your chest? Are you, is your heart pounding? What's happening with you inside your body? So That's the first step, is to identify that, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, and then the second step is to try to name, like I actually have a written list, for example. Actually name when you know when you're anxious, because that's a way to flip the power dynamic. One of the things we say in our class is one of the reasons to get a pet is so you can name it. Because if you name your pet, you have complete control of your pet.
Right, except you.
Of course not true. Yeah, my dog has me very well trained. My dog has been training me for 8 years now. and I think the training is complete. But I digress. But there's something about naming something that gives you power over it. So if you can name what makes you anxious, you actually become less anxious.
Okay.
It's crazy.
So what would that look like? Tell me what that would look like.
Well, like I know, for example...
For preaching.
Yeah, for preaching, like I'm a preacher. I get up on most weeks and I stand in front of a room of people and tell them things. And one of the things that makes me anxious is I want people to like me. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you're a preacher, you can often say provocative things. So actually, even this last week, I noticed 3 people walked out while I was preaching.
Do you really think it was because of what you said?
I can tell when people are walking out to go to the bathroom and when they're storming out.
Really?
It's a very different exit when they're leaving angry versus when they're leaving.
What did you say to make them do that, Steve?
I talked about how we are in an era where brave women are coming forward and naming sexual assault and how that can be threatening to all white guys.
Awesome.
And so I had 3 white guys get up and walk out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite something.
Okay.
So when that happens, that can make me anxious because I have a need to be liked by people, which is a crazy need when you're a preacher. So for example, for a photographer, if you particularly are newer at this and you just don't feel like you're good enough to be charging what you're charging, you're already coming into a photo shoot with some anxiety, what we would call the imposter syndrome, where you think, I don't belong here. So then if things aren't going well, if whatever's not working out, it kind of starts to make you even more anxious. But by knowing that you have that anxiety, it actually de-escalates it.
Okay. So naming that anxiety, let me just make sure that we're still live because I'm a little concerned. I'm not seeing any action on here. Wow, this is just so bad if we're not. If we're live, if you could just comment something. Yeah. We're not live anymore.
So weird, huh?
Yeah.
It's not.
Can you just comment if we are live? Because it says we're still... Oh, we are live. We're still live. That is so bizarre. Huh. It's not showing up on our page. Awesome. I'm so glad. Okay. All right. So you're figuring out in your body what it is, or your head, your heart. What was the other one?
Your gut.
Your gut.
Or just your neck.
I think my daughter, it's gut, because she'll get really sick to her stomach before things.
That's it, exactly.
And then after that, you can name it.
Yep.
You can name what your anxiety is.
Yes, and so of course we are doing a 30-minute webinar on a 9-month class. But having said that, like for me, there's probably 30 to 50 sources of anxiety. So you're beginning the journey of naming it. So imposter syndrome would be one of 30 to 50 things. But you start naming it.
Okay.
And then at that point, you definitely have to figure out some tricks that make you non-anxious, that de-escalate your anxiety. Right.
And those would be, because like we're all wanting to know what those are.
That's the magic
First of all, I want to
sauce.
ask you, we're talking about anxiety, how we feel it in our body. Some people have already commented, and thanks for the little smiley face. We love hearts too. But also let us know, what are some things that you've done when you're feeling a certain fear or anxiety come on? What do you do so that you can kind of combat this? We've got a lot of people from church on here. I'm really wondering if I put this on my personal page instead of the Snapside page.
Oh, sure.
But we'll see.
Sure.
So what are some things that you do to combat your anxiety so that you have a grip on it versus it having a grip on you? Steve, give us some tips.
Yeah, okay, so when I was a hospital chaplain, I served on the code team. The code team, if you've ever seen hospital dramas on TV, it's actually quite a lot like that. It's actually a fairly accurate, except all the melodrama and dating and all of that.
Yeah.
But the code team is when somebody's heart stops anywhere in the hospital, a group of people run to the room, and the doctors and nurses run in the room with a cart and the paddles and the clear and all of that. And then the chaplain's job is to sit just outside the room with the family, and you just have to wait. You just have to sit with a family and wait and see what's going to happen with a loved one. And so there were 2 sayings that the chaplains and the doctors had. Saying number 1 was, when somebody's heart stops, your heart starts racing because you're so anxious. Like there's nothing to do but wait. And the hardest thing to do with people who are desperately hoping is just to sit and wait. And then one of the doctors taught me, he said, anytime somebody's heart stops, first take your own pulse. That was his little rule. And I actually saw a doctor do it. It was crazy. I was up at the code room. I'm waiting for the family, and this doctor is running toward the room, and right before he goes in, he just checks his pulse, And then he runs in and does
Were you
the
like,
code.
what are you
It was
doing?
crazy.
You are wasting time,
It was
man.
crazy. And afterwards, I'm like, what was that? And he says, oh, well, the rule is anytime someone's heart stops, you first take your own pulse. When you're anxious, the temptation is to worry more about your anxiety. You just kind of get into this vicious cycle. It's actually my mother used to call it. My mother used to go, what's this? She'd go, and you're like, I don't know. She's like, it's a vicious circle. That's my charming mother.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so anxiety puts you in a vicious circle, but if you can just stop. The other thing that is helpful is anytime you fly on a plane, the flight attendant says, in the unlikely event of an accident, oxygen masks will fall, and then they make this really weird instruction. They say, first put the mask on your own face before helping a loved one.
Right.
That's because it's counterintuitive for any parent to take care of themselves before they take care of their child. That's why they say it over and over again. And it's kind of the same with anxiety. Like if you are noticing that you're anxious, if you're able to notice where it starts, and then if you're able to notice your triggers like imposter syndrome or whatever it is, rather than feeding it, if you can just stop, and sometimes it's 10 seconds, sometimes it's an hour, it depends, and take care of yourself, your ability to move into an anxious situation increases.
Okay.
And this really comes into play if you're doing a photo shoot, for example, with an already anxious family. Your ability to not get caught up into their anxiety is really paramount to getting a good photo out of
Right,
it. So
right.
if you maybe have a surly high school senior and he doesn't want to smile and his mum is very anxious because she's got him all the nice clothes and everything, your ability to not get caught into that triangle is really instrumental. So rather than like getting sucked in and getting all worried, you can just take your pulse or put the mask on your own face and get some help.
Yeah. So we were talking about before you go and preach, sometimes you do something in the back.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
And I've actually done a similar thing. So when
Yeah.
you said, I was like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so sometimes a physiological response is the solution to anxiety. So backstage, I can't do jumping jacks or anything. It's too loud. So I just do planks.
Okay.
And just sitting, I usually do 4 or 5 planks. And it just kind of, I don't know, it just gets my nervousness and just settles it a little bit.
That would be awesome if you did jumping jacks, though. Because I would know what you're doing, and everybody else would be like, what's
You just
going
hear
on
that
back
weird noise
there?
backstage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll do that. I'll do something physical to kind of get everything out. And because my heart is racing so fast, it's almost like that's all I know to do. In fact, that's how I started sprinting. Was because running just was not enough. I had to actually be sprinting.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm a follower of Jesus. Like I'm a pastor. So for me, oftentimes the oxygen mask or the pulse is a prayer, and just for me to be able to name in the moment, what can I control and what can I not control? And then just giving what I can't control to God. So if you're at a photo shoot and you've got crazy mum, you can't control that. You can't worry about it. And so for me, prayer is also a huge, huge tool.
awesome. Okay, so so the first thing is that we've got to identify that we're anxious, and then when we identify that we're anxious, we can name it. And so
name one of the sources. Yeah.
Yep, name what the sources is, because I really like the example that you gave. Hopefully you gave it on this live and not the last live. Just like that, you know that it's in your head. And so if you go to sleep thinking about it and then you wake up thinking about it, you know that it's an anxiety for you. It's a source of anxiety for you.
Yep. If you're apologizing a lot to people, that's a sign.
Ooh.
Yeah. Hey,
Ooh,
look.
that's such a female thing too.
It's a male thing too.
Oh, is it?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Really? I don't
hey,
see
I'm
many
not very
guys-
good at this. I'm kind of new. Really sorry.
Oh, that kind of apology.
Yeah, I spent the first 3 years of my preaching apologizing to the congregation. It was really bad.
Yeah. Okay, so, and then the anxiety really does have a trickle-down effect, whether it's to your kids or to your clients. Or sometimes the trickle-down effect is that you actually don't even do anything. Like you...
Yeah, just run away from it.
Yeah.
For sure. Yep, and sometimes what's going on is you are picking up on the anxiety of others, and that's making you anxious. So that's the other trick, is to notice it not just in yourself, but if you can notice it in groups, it gives you power to not be infected by it.
Okay. So this is kind of just an inside job. I mean, really, it's kind of us talking, like recognizing that is happening, maybe sometimes naming it out loud.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think giving it a specific name gives you
But
power
then is that
over it.
apologizing?
I see what you're saying. No, apologizing is demeaning yourself. It's like, hey, I'm new at this, or Naming out loud is more of a vulnerability. That's a pretty nuanced difference. I don't know how I could speak to that for photographers. Like, being vulnerable with people, I think is fine, but I think I'd defer to you on that, where the line is on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and then we have some practical tips. Any other practical tips that you can, even just before a shoot, doing some jumping jacks, just to get your body, that anxiety.
Yes. Another practical tip is if you can learn, this takes a little longer, but if you can learn to think about the way you think, rather than if you can learn to be a sociologist of yourself, and if you can start to notice patterns. So, for example, some people, when they don't know what to do, they just get overwhelmed. Other people, when they don't know what to do, they research it and figure out what to do.
Yeah.
So one of the ways to de-escalate anxiety, and this is a little more advanced, this is something we take longer to teach, is to start to notice when you're stuck.
Okay.
And when you seem to do the same solution for the same problem and it's not getting you anywhere, that's a sign.
Okay.
So again, particularly if maybe you're starting out, if you find yourself going to shoots and having the same issues where you don't feel like you're good enough or any of that, that's usually the sign that you're now doing more of the same. So if you're able to notice whatever the problem is, particularly like in parenting, this is where it really hits the road in parenting.
Okay.
If you notice that your kid is always having the same struggle and you're always applying the same solution, all you're doing is more of the same.
Yep.
And so your ability to not get sucked into he said, she said, but actually get above it and notice the way you relate to each other is a little more deeper. So, for example, those of you who are married or in a relationship that you really value, you and your loved one can notice not what you fight about, but the way you fight. Because the way you fight is almost always the same way. Even if the content of what you fight about is different, if you fight about money or sex or how to raise the kids or whatever you fight about, but the way you fight is predictable. Yeah. One of you escalates it, the other one runs away because they don't like conflict, they need space, but you need to resolve, and so you go after them, whatever it is. And your ability to notice that pattern gives you way more power over your anxiety than just more of the same.
Right, so breaking the cycle. So I think we could relate that with our businesses too. So photography, if you're doing a shoot and you constantly, you cannot get interaction or you cannot get emotion out of your clients, then that's probably telling you, you might need some training on that. You might need to shadow somebody who can do that. It doesn't come naturally to you, that's okay. But you can't keep doing the same things you've always done because it's not working. So you have to break the cycle and do something different.
That's right. If you apply try harder, air quotes for free, if you apply try harder to the same solution that's not working, you'll make it worse.
Right.
Yeah.
This is so good. This is so great. I love all this information. And like I said before, in one of the Facebook Lives that we did, that Steve is coming out with a book. He's also coming out with a website. And the book won't be coming out until April. But if you want to follow Steve on his website, what is that? Yeah,
my website's stevecusswords.com. My last name is Cuss, so I have fun with it. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Steve Cusswords. I'm on Facebook as Steve Cuss. And then we have a podcast launching November 12th where we bring guests on and they talk about their anxiety and how they deal with it.
Awesome. And in the comments here, I'll have all that linked. So, all right. Thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thanks for dealing with the technological difficulties that we've had today.